But in another application, we deal with a lot of people that are off-road. Their wheels are submersed in mud and sand and dirt. At times, they're even being pulled by D8 cats to get on and off a lease site. This is a pretty extreme environment. What things should a mechanic be thinking about, or a small fleet, when they're looking at buying brakes when they're in that kind of an environment?
That's a difficult question because brakes were not designed to run in that type of environment, because you want to have a clean surface between the friction and the brake drum. And so if you have sand in there, sand is especially bad because it's an abrasive that will score the drum and the friction itself. And so it's going to wear out the brake lining very quickly. Mud is not as bad, but it's not going to help the stopping power, because if you have mud in there, you're not going to get the same amount of braking power that you normally would. So the off-road environment that you're describing is extremely difficult, and they really have to maintain these things almost on a daily basis to make sure that the drum to friction mating surface is kept clean. Brakes don't work if they're not.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So when you look at an independent fleet, and perhaps they're not as sophisticated in technology as some of the large national fleets are with tracking things, what is a simple way to set up a system to measure cost per mile? Like, have you seen anything, or could you share anything with us from your experience of how somebody would go about doing that?
Well, I'll tell you how we would go about promoting that concept. We developed a spreadsheet many years ago that you can do in front of a customer to explain what cost per mile means when it comes to replacement brake linings. For example, you have to take a look at all of the components that go into doing a brake job. It's not just replacing the brake shoes. Most times they're going to replace a drum. They should at least rebush the camshafts. They have to replace wheel seals, all those type of things. And basically, we put together a spreadsheet that can calculate what the cost of those different components are. And even let's take for an example a guy that wants to buy a brake shoe for $10 versus one that might cost $15. Well, that $15 brake shoe, if it extends the life of the brake job by 30 or 40%, that $5 that you paid for it is not a difficult thing to recover, because if you get that much more life, it means you're not going to have to put those other components back into it. And over the life of the vehicle, it's much cheaper to maintain friction material if you can extend the service life. And it's really and it's not just the components, it's also the labor aspect of it. Doing a brake job, takes a couple of hours and of a mechanic's time, plus the truck is not in working. It's tied up. So it's labor, it's the component parts, and just the downtime.
Bob, do you have that available that we could share with the audience, an example? Like, could you send me that template and I could set it up as a link?
I can. As a matter of fact, the way it's set up is there's a tab on there for tractor, trailer, and then you input different things: how many parts you buy, how much you pay for each one of them, and then based on the calculation of what kind of extended life you're going to get, it'll self-calculate what the savings are going to be over the life of the vehicle. It's a pretty slick tool, and most fleet guys, especially the unsophisticated ones, they don't understand this concept.
Yeah.
But the larger fleets do, and that's why most of the larger fleets use premium friction products, and they try to do the brake jobs the right way when they do them, because they know that if they can extend the life, or let's just say that they can reduce 2 brake jobs over 100,000 miles of a tractor's life, or 1,000,000 miles, whatever it might be. I mean, these over-the-highway tractors, many of them go for 1,000,000 miles. And if you can eliminate 2 brake jobs during that time, that's a huge savings.
You're listening to the Heavy Duty Parts Report. I'm your host, Jamie Irvine, and we've been speaking with Bob Hicks, president of Marathon Brake. And we've been talking about what makes a truly premium friction material, also the importance of cost per mile over purchase price. Now, Bob, with the Marathon lineup, you mentioned that there are a number of different products that you manufacture, different grades. And I was hoping to talk to you a little bit about that, because really this is now a conversation not just about cost per mile, but also application. So sometimes there are applications where a customer genuinely doesn't need a premium brake lining. They have a situation where a more economical brake lining is going to meet their needs. Do you have a product that fits that kind of a scenario?
Sure. We have a product that fits every scenario and also fits the price points that are required in the marketplace by our competitors. And so, yeah, we do. If a guy, I'll just give you a quick example. If a fleet is operating over the highway and is not doing a lot of significant braking, a lower cost brake lining will likely perform pretty well. On the other hand, a sanitation truck is not going to have the same situation. They're going to have very high temperatures in the brakes. They need a severe duty material in order to not have to reline it every 2 weeks. So it's a completely different application, and it really gets down to the heat that the brake sees. That's what's the bad thing for friction is too much heat.
Okay, so it's heat that we're thinking about. So if you have an application where there isn't high heat situations, you're not doing a lot of braking, a more economical product, that one that you provide could work perfect for that scenario. Now, what about someone, let's say we're in that off-road situation, and no matter what you're going to do, because you're in that environment, you're really only looking to get from CVIP to CVIP, 1 year of service. Is there a product that's kind of in the middle range that would be appropriate cost, would get them that year's life, but there's not really a lot of point going higher than that, because there's so much sand and garbage in there. If you pay more, you're just throwing money away. Like, is there a scenario there, or a brake lining that would fit that scenario?
Sure. Yeah, and we would offer it in both 20 and 23,000 pound ranges, and actually we have other linings that rate up to 28,000 pounds too. It depends on the type of truck, because there's not a whole lot of those really heavy axles, but there's some out there, and they require a very specific brake lining. Now, the ones that are used on those really severe heavy axles, we don't make in cheap products. It's you got to make the material that you know is going to hold up to the heat that it's going to see. But in the off-highway description that you just offered, yeah, there's middle-of-the-road type linings that would probably be very adequate, where it may not make sense to put up the best product available, because it's going to wear out prematurely anyway, especially if it's going to see debris like sand and things of that nature.
And what elements does that kind of middle of the road brake have? Like, what features about that brake make it good, make it last that, let's say, 1 year that we're looking to get out of it?
Well, let's reverse it from the other side. What the difference is in the raw materials between our premium products to the middle of the road products to the economy grade products are all related to what's in the raw materials. And as you remove a certain percentage of your more expensive raw materials, typically what you sacrifice is wear and not performance, because regardless of whether it's an economy grade product or a premium grade product, it still has to pass the 121 test at the axle load that it's recommended for. So the actual retardation that the lining puts out would be the same regardless of what grade it is. But what's going to be sacrificed as you go down the food chain in the quality aspect is going to be wear. That's the primary difference.
So that's why we see so many brakes with that 23,000 pound number stamped on the side of it in their marketing, is because everybody's got to pass that. It's just, how long will you be able to operate at that level?
Well, the 23,000 thing that you just mentioned is something that's badly misunderstood in our industry. 90% of the trucks that are on the road don't have 23,000 pound axles. They have 20,000 pound axles, almost all of them, except for a straight truck that's only got one axle, or a tractor that's only got one axle. But most of the tractors that are out there are tandems. Those axles are not rated at 23,000 pounds. They're 20. And that's what goes on them when the when a truck is built at the factory. In places like Canada, everybody uses 23,000 pound lining, regardless of what the axle load is, because I don't know, it's always been that way. And we've seen more and more of it here in the United States too, as there's been more and more offshore suppliers bringing in private label product. And the way they promote it is that it's a 23,000 pound lining, so it must be better. And that's the way it's sold. Not so much for the fact that it's designed for 23K axles. They're trying to equate 23,000 pounds with a higher quality. And that's just rubbish. It's just not the way it is.